I'm Ian O'Neill.
I'm Caoilte Barra.
I'm Andy Stevenson, and you're listening to the Auld Triangle.
We're an Irish MMA podcast brought to you by SevereMMA.com.
From amateurs to pros, regional shows to Irish fighters abroad, we're all over Irish MMA.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, hit subscribe, and now let's start the episode.
Yes, indeed. We are back with episode 8. We've done it, lads. 8 episodes, can you believe it? Of the Auld Triangle.
Getting close to double digits.
Yeah, we're getting close, guys. We're getting close. The Auld Triangle is back. And so is Andy Stevenson. And so is Caoilte Barra and myself, Ian O'Neill, to bring you episode 8, where we're going to chat all things Irish MMA. And I'm really looking forward to doing it. Andy joins us today all the way from Boston.
We've gone worldwide,
from home.
Even more worldwide than we were before.
There you go. We're spreading our wings. We're spreading our wings. Represented. We're recording in 3 different countries this week, and it's great. So, looking forward to getting into it. And we're going to take a look back at all things that have happened in Irish MMA over the past couple of weeks since we've last been recording. Lots of news stories, lots of fight announcements. A few questions and answers, and we have Andy Taz Young with us today for an interview ahead of his upcoming fight with Scott Malone at Cage Warriors Belfast. Really looking forward to speaking to Andy, one of the OGs of Irish MMA. So let's get into it, guys. Plenty of news stories, plenty of talking points over the last couple of weeks. We'll start. I'd like to start with a fight that I think we're going to take credit for this one. I realize Rhys Mckee versus Justin Burlinson is now official.
Did you not say Figlac?
No, maybe I did.
Caoilte and I'll take credit for this one.
Credit off the back of you guys. I know I did say Figlac, but I was just trying to change it up a little bit. I'm not upset with this fight either.
You just didn't want to follow the crowd, was it? Is that it?
Nah, that's it. Yeah, I like to be out on my own, you know. But look at even if it's not Figlac, Justin Burlinson is a great fight for Rhys Mckee, and it's a great. They're going to put this in the main event slot, I believe, as well. And I think it's a very worthy fight. I'm excited to see Rhys back in there. Obviously, Justin Burlinson looked great in his last fight, coming off the Contender Series and that disappointing defeat there. But you know, these two guys are going back into the to get back into the UFC, guys, and this is the perfect opportunity for them both to kind of, you know, get the Cage Warriors title and maybe look for it. And that's maybe the question I'll have, and I'll bring to you, Andy. Do you know, and I have my own thoughts maybe, but do you think a win here kind of seals another opportunity into the UFC, or what can you see happening?
Oh God, I mean, it's so hard to tell these days what gets you into the UFC and what doesn't. But if let's say, okay, we're talking about Rhys Mckee, that last performance that he had was, in my opinion, his career best. I thought he looked absolutely fantastic. If he gets a win over Justin Burlinson, I think there's a very good chance. I do think it's so hard to say, but I would hope that this would get him back into the UFC, or at least one away. You know what I mean? Like, this would be, he'd be a champion. He is yet to become a champion in Cage Warriors. I know, you know, the plan was back in the day or a couple of years ago now, to fight in Belfast for the title, and then of course he went on to the UFC. So it's a huge fight for both of them. And also Justin Burlinson got knocked out on the Contender Series. You know, he was primed and ready to take a contract there. So I thought he showed incredible grit and heart in his last fight to overcome Stevenson and get the win there. So the massive fight here we have in our hands, and I do think, I don't know if they'll get signed, but they'll be in, you know, touch and distance of a second crack with the UFC for either fighter if they win.
Well, Figlac is waiting in the wings, Caoilte. I mean, and he's likely the next challenger for whoever wins this. I mean, what do you see happening in this fight?
Well, with this fight in particular, I couldn't call it, to be honest. I think it's going to be fantastic. It's a worthy headliner, really high level fight, but I don't think it's going to get them to the UFC, to be honest with you. I think there's so many unanswered questions with the Cage Warriors like welterweight division, and there's so many people, be it coming on the rise, you Figlak in the wings, as you're saying. So like he could have easily gotten this title shot too. I think there may be the winner. I think if they defend it once, then maybe. But I don't think this one title win will do it. Look at Jordan Vucenic, for example. He's had to defend his title, so what, once, twice maybe now? And we still don't know if he's going to go to the UFC or going to stay with Cage Warriors. So it might not be as black and white as it may seem. You win the title, you go to the UFC. I think it's going to get to a point where they'll have to start defending once or twice, and I believe that's what's going to happen with this one too.
Do you think it's got to be, for Rhys, it's much more likely if he wins, he'll get in, right? I mean, Justin Burleson that would be a long contender series versus Rhys going the distance. Oh, well, sorry, no, he didn't go the distance with Chimaev, but we all know what Chimaev is, and then going the distance in a very competitive fight with Alex Morono, so it's a bit different for the two of them.
Yeah, no, fair. I agree with that on the Rhys thing, and I think he mentioned in an interview after he got cut from the UFC that they were keeping tabs on him for when he left and fought in other promotions. I think he did that with Niall McGrath after he got caught. So maybe you're right, and maybe it is just the one win to get him back in there, because he was dealt a hard card going into the UFC.
100%, and with how good he's looked in his last fight, maybe there's no harm in getting a couple, getting say a 3-fight win streak and then going back in, but yeah, it'd be very interesting to see.
I'm kind of along the lines where I think a win for Justin Burleson probably wouldn't seal his fate back to the UFC. I think he probably would need a win and a couple of defenses. With Rhys, it's possible, but I don't know if it's be the right move for him right now. I think if you get a win here against Justin Burleson and go in against someone like Figlak as well, like you've got to be thinking with the talent that's coming through right now that there's going to be an Irish show soon. Will it be? It probably won't be this year. Will it be next year? The UFC were scheduled to come back in 2020 before the pandemic hit. So, it's definitely on the UFC's radar. I'd love for somebody to ask that question, to see what the UFC is thinking. But definitely with the talent that's coming through now, it would make me think that, it'd be a perfect opportunity for someone like Rhys to maybe just fight another few fights or fight out his Cage Warriors contract. I'm not too sure how many
he's
fights.
He's only 26 as well, so
exactly,
he's still so young, and he's a lot of time. And yeah, the welterweight division has been interesting because you've got Figlak who's kind of waiting in the wings, but then you've got Matthew Bonner, and Rhys and Matthew Bonner, or at least from Rhys' side, he really doesn't seem to like this guy, but but not in a way where there'd be a kind of grudge fight. It's like he just doesn't like him and doesn't want anything to do with him, doesn't want to give him an opportunity. I interviewed Rhys recently enough, and he was saying that Bonner seems to be continuously calling him out, and he was very dismissive of the whole thing. Doesn't think that it would do anything for him even to pick up a win over someone like that, which is, that's a former champion, so I don't know if others would agree with that, but yeah, it's interesting in the welterweight division at the moment.
That it is. And also another great fight that was announced on that card is definitely worth a mention is Paddy McCurry versus Jordan O'Neill. Caoilte, talk to me about that fight. Jesus, that is an unbelievable fight in the middleweight division.
Absolutely incredible. There's a bit of a story to it as well. Let's see if I can get this right off the bat. So you had, I think it was Troy Gibson beat Blaine McGill, who would have been Jordan O'Neill's teammate. Jordan O'Neill goes out and beats Troy Gibson in his last fight. And now you have Paddy McCurry coming in here, and it's like this back and forth between the two gyms. And it looks like it's going to be settled now with this pro bout in Cage Warriors. It's so good. Paddy's looked fantastic since turning pro, and Jordan's just his last fight. We all watched it. We all saw how good it was. Yeah, amazing matchmaking, and I really enjoy it. It's one of those things though, pitting two prospects against each other really early. And I'm here for it. I love it. I
know, Andy, you're not never a big fan of it either. Prospects, Irish prospects fighting one another.
I hate these Irish matches. This is disgusting affair. I think it's great. Do you know what? It's funny you joke about that, because I've noticed myself as these fights are getting announced, there's been a me that's I don't know if I like this. Which usually I'm the one fucking calling for Irish on Irish crime, essentially here, Irish on Irish violence. I think this is a great fight. What's an interesting point on this one for me is I believe Paddy Mckee has gotten nose surgery recently enough. So my understanding is he hasn't been able to breathe properly at all in his fighting career. So anytime I hear of someone, you know, having a surgery or something like that, where they, you know, they can actually just breathe better, that's got to have a massive effect on how you fight. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if how that plays out, or if it'll, you know, add another wrinkle to his game, I guess, in the form of cardio or whatever. But Paddy Mckee's looked great. Like that, I think he had a great knockout in the Falls Park there not too long ago. Jordan O'Neill has looked fantastic at amateur. Obviously, you know, this will be a transition. It's a tough fight for Jordan O'Neill coming into the pros. It is a transition, you know, going from 3-minute rounds to 5-minute rounds, adding tools in, and this is where a new wrinkle from the Jordan O'Neill side is how will he look when he's able to throw elbows now. Will he be even more vicious? We saw him against Troy Gibson, and, you know, that was a one-way, it was all one-way traffic there in that fight. He's looked really, really powerful. So 2 northern prospects, this is...
And to Jordan's credit, like in that Troy Gibson fight, he didn't look to be tiring all that much with the rounds. So I'd be thinking, you know, he's going to integrate into the 5-minute rounds pretty well. But it is an adjustment, you know. You have to those adjustments will come in fight, obviously, and come in the training camp too. And, you know, Paddy Mckee has been looking unbelievable in his couple of performances as a professional as well. And I'm buzzing for this fight. It's a great fight. Moving on to Cage Legacy, who've announced a show, the Cage Legacy 16 show. A few fights were announced there. Sean O'Bannon is back. Nadine Abbott-Bissett is back. Jamie Abbott-Bissett is back. Keane McCartan is back. But the main event, all about Sean O'Bannon again.
There'll probably be a few more Abbott-Bissets thrown in there at some point.
There could be. Yeah, there could be. Sean O'Bannon. Tell me about Caoilte. Tell me about Sean O'Bannon's opponent. She's coming in there headlining the card against Caoilte for the flyweight belt. Shauna will be moving up in weight from the strawweight division. She secured the strawweight title at Cage Warriors 15. She's moving up to the flyweight to secure the flyweight belt. Tell me about her opponent, Caoilte.
It's a very funny one how I came across this, her opponent. So basically, I was chatting to the Nigerian MMA Federation recently for a story for IMMAF, and I think I saw them tag her, or she was tagged in one of their socials, and had a look and realized she had this Irish connection. So essentially what's been happening, she's been learning on the job a little bit with, like she says it herself in one of her posts, that she hasn't had an amateur background, but so she's learned on the job in pro. She's had 3 fights now, all in very quick succession. I think from the top of my head, I think she debuted back like late 2021.
Yeah, and it was December 2021.
Crazy, like, so she's been really learning the job. Now, this is where it gets a little bit different. She is really, really like good on the mat, from what I can tell. It's hard to tell from fights, but if you look at some of the grappling credentials, she's been in her smooth comp amount of record, or when you've got record, just amount of bouts and medals she's picked up. So she's no pushover, she's no slouch. It's clear that she's got some really good grappling credentials, and that could play a massive factor. It's funny, as soon as I saw she put on Instagram, she's coming back to Ireland, she's going to train in Team Torres, and wanted a pro fight while she was over here because she's been so active. As soon as I saw that, I was thinking, oh, she's flyweight. It's like, this could actually work out. And you could end up seeing Sean O'Bannon fighting her. Lo and behold, I think the next week gets announced, and mental altogether. But it's an interesting bout, to say the least. One that just seemed to come around very randomly, if anything.
Yeah, indeed. It'll be interesting to see that going down. I'm looking forward to seeing Shauna back in there again. She's staying active, which is good. And, she has a chance to fight at home too. I think early on in career, it's no harm to be putting yourself onto these kind of cards. I know Sean has been talking about maybe going over to the stateside and stuff like that as well. So, I'm excited.
When you had the boisterous support and like the atmosphere that Caoilte talked about in a previous episode that was there for the last Cage Legacy one for Shauna, like why wouldn't you stay local for one more before heading off? Like, there's no harm.
One or two or more, maybe away and then back.
Yeah.
Getting that kind of getting those videos and getting them out there and seeing your fans, that builds your fan base as well. Yeah. I mean, like the atmosphere, even watching back the fight again, I was watching it during the week when it was released. it was like, Jesus, the atmosphere in that place was absolutely electric. You were right there, Caoilte. You could see it for yourself, and I think that just adds to everything else, and adds to the excitement around Shauna as well. And we'll get to see it again at Cage Legacy 16 on June 10th, I believe. I don't have the date in front of me.
It's in Meath this time though. Last one's in Tallaght. I'd say it's still going to be absolutely ridiculous.
It was. I mean, for the fight against Chanel Dyer, like they were blowing the roof off the place there as well. Like Shauna brings a great support with her. I think it is a tough ask for Caoilte. I mean, I don't know much about her, but just looking at her record, like the fighters she's fought so far have been 0-1, 0-2, 0-0. You know, so Shauna will definitely be the toughest test of her short career to date.
That indeed. Another tough test is, speaking of Chanel Dyer as well, she goes in to take on Nadine Abbott Bissett, and that's a fight I'm really looking forward to. Like, obviously, I'm looking forward to any Nadine Abbott Bissett fights. I thought she's always putting on some great performances. She looked great when taking her gold medal at the IMMAFs earlier on, or last year, I believe it was. And look at that's going to be another good fight. Chanel Dyer, you know, she's not getting matched up too easily at Cage Legacy, but she's very worthy of all the tests that are being put in front of her. Would you agree, Caoilte?
Title fight too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nice, yeah. Strawweight belt. Well, it's a tough fight for both. I think it's exciting really, because you have Nadine Abbott Bissett like staying really active. I think she's got another fight lined up at UKFC, and then she got this fight with Chanel Dyer. That one's like, it's crazy. Fair play to Chanel Dyer, like, and fair play to Cage Legacy for actually getting amateurs from abroad as well and bringing them over and testing them against Ireland's best. And it should be fantastic. But clearly not easy matchmaking. Very, very competitive matchmaking, and I love it.
This is the way it should be amateur though, right? You want to be
100%.
testing yourself against the best of the best. There's no, it doesn't, whatever, you lose, who cares? You'll test your skills and then you'll grow from that. So it's great to see them taking hard tests.
Big time, 100%. You got to do it at amateur level. And speaking of hard tests, Gary Rooney versus Jamie Abbott Bissett was also announced. Christ almighty, this is an unbelievable fight. I can't wait. Like, just even talking about it, like, I've seen it, and now we're getting the chance, like, to talk about it, and just I'm getting hyped up even talking about it here now. But Gary Rooney versus Jamie Abbott Bissett is you're talking about two of the best prospects coming through right now. And this is what you have to love about, you know, Cage Legacy, Ear Championships, Cage Conflict. They're putting on these fights, and I love to fucking see it, to be honest. And this fight between Gary Rooney and Jamie Abbott Bissett is a fucking unbelievable fight.
How do you see them matching up? Like, when I look at these, they almost are kind of carbon copies of each other in some ways. They absolutely
are. I mean, both of them are absolutely supremely talented grapplers. They like to impose their will on their opponents in their fights. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. You know, I'm wondering, you know, time and time again, when we see two prominent grapplers go together, we end up seeing a striking battle. And I'd be interested to see if this kind of fight materializes that way as well. You know, both of them have IMMAF experience. Both of them have been in against some tough opponents recently. Like Gary Rooney was very good against Matthew Friel, had to fucking come back from some adversity at the start of that fight as well, was caught in a Darce choke. But, you know, two of them are tough as cookies, tough as nails, and they're going to go out and put on a hell of a show at Cage Legacy 16. Like, if you're going to be tuning in, this is a fight. I know Paul Brown
is pure sport, isn't it? Like, this is
Paul Brown
exactly
asked us to break down this fight, and I mean, this is I'm interested. I'd like to see this fight play out on the feet a little bit, just to see. I think right now, as it stands, I'd probably give a slight advantage to Jamie Abbott Bissett on the feet between the two. But I've not seen Gary Rooney striking all that much. He's so good at getting his opponents down and imposing his will, getting submissions and just grinding on them. And that's what he loves to do. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But I mean, this fight is top notch. And Paul Brown asked us to break it down, and we'll take a look at it a little bit deeper, I guess, closer to the fight card. But I mean, this is a highlight for me on the card. Obviously, the two fights that we just mentioned as well, two highlights, but this one is one I'm really looking forward to, between Rooney and Abbott Bissett, and two absolute studs going at it in there.
Would it be fair to say that I would think so anyway, that these two are probably the best amateur flyweight prospects coming out of Ireland right now, like the top two.
I think so.
I would say that now. It's fantastic. Like really, really good fight. We want to know, I'm pretty sure that they probably trained together everything, but the one thing I noted when looking at this was the amount of times these lads have fought in this year so far. Like it's May, and I'm pretty sure they've had they're averaging more than a fight a month right now. Absolutely ridiculous amount of experience they're building up. Like it's gonna be fantastic. I'm buzzing for this.
Yeah, indeed. Like, I mean, it's important. Get those fights under your belt. Get the experience. Like, I'm a huge proponent of fight experience is the type of experience that you need, and especially at the amateur level. That's why I wouldn't be in any rush if I was an amateur to make that jump to pro. Like, and we're seeing it a lot. Like, even Gary Rooney, he spoke to Harry. He spoke to Harry Powell before his last fight against Matthew Friel on the YouTube channel, and he was saying, he's not in any rush at all. Harry asked him, like, is he looking towards the professional ranks yet? He said, no, not at all. He said he wants to rack up 20 amateur fights. He wants to go to the IMMAFs again. And I love hearing that from fighters. I mean, there is no rush to get to the professional ranks. You can garner just the right amount of experience that you feel like these fighters are going to know when they're ready. But I'd much prefer see, the likes of Alexander O'Sullivan, the guys who are building up 20 fights in their amateur career and then bringing that into the professional ranks. It's only
we're seeing guys have a lot of success. Like, look outside of Ireland, look at, like, say Christian Edwards. No, Leroy Christian Leroy Duncan. Sorry, Christian Leroy Duncan in Cage Warriors. He's just won a title. Like Muhammad Makayev. There's so many fighters who are having, Jack Shore had an extensive amateur career. There's all these people who are spending the time in the amateur ranks, and then it's paying off as pros. And obviously it's,
we're kind of only seeing the fruits of that labor coming through right now, because it didn't always exist that way, and that's maybe down to the fact that there wasn't that many opportunities at amateur in the past. But now there's plenty of opportunities. There's plenty of shows. You've got the IMMAFs as well, whether you want to compete on that, whether you don't. You have options on shows now as well, which is great to see, and I'm delighted to see it as well. And you know what, we're going to see more and more of these type of fighters coming through with extensive amateur careers and be successful in the professional ranks, and the proof is in the pudding there. Another quick couple of tidbits before we go into our main topic here. Adam Darby turning pro. He's looking for a fight right now. Unfortunately, his UKFC fight fell through. Glenn McVeigh is matched up to fight Sakai Kumbari. Always excited to see Glenn. I know Glenn has fought at Brave. This is at the name escapes me now.
Fight Club Rush.
Fight Club, yeah. He's taking on Sakai Kumbari there. I'm excited to see Glenn in action. I mean, Glenn is as tough as they come.
Does his opponent train at Valstars, or is it the other gym that Gorilla trains out of? It's one of those, I think.
Yeah,
I feel like Glenn's always taken on these really, really tough prospects. But yeah, Jesus, fair play.
He did the exact same thing in Brave as well, and taking fights at short notice as well. Like, I mean, all credit to Glenn. No one can say that he's ever taken the easy fight anyway, and always is entertaining as well. And I wish him the best going into that fight too. I'm looking forward to seeing him compete. Pavel Politico got a good win at KSW. Konstantin Nusaryov lost in a recent fight as well, unfortunately. Cage Conflict, I think maybe Jared Harris may have broken the Cage Conflict date when he announced his next fight is set to take place, where he'll be defending his title on the 23rd of July. Obviously, we'll wait and hear some news from the Cage Conflict guys, which could be out by the time this podcast is put out. We're recording this on Sunday. The podcast will be out Wednesday. We might have some news there, we might not, but we'll definitely talk about more Cage Conflict on the next podcast. Premier FC announced a bunch of good fights for their second show. I know that I saw a great fight, Tristan Barnett versus Brian Manning there, Craig Crawley versus Jason Hackasey, Jonathan Duggan versus Rob Hallahan. The boys are putting on some good cards there down in the country. This one, Premier FC 2 on in Clonmel, and I seen them standing outside one of my old stomping grounds in O'Loughlin Gales Club in Kilkenny as well, and they're teasing a show in August for there. Jeez, and that would be one I'd love to be able to go and see, but I don't know if I can make
The
that
return
happen.
of Ian O'Neill.
Imagine how stop.
You should come back and
Main
fight
event.
it.
We're getting like fucking post-traumatic post-traumatic stress after remembering some of the fights I had in there. But yeah, great venue though. I'd be excited to see. Hopefully they'll have the stream there. I'll be able to watch. But Loughlin Gales is a great venue. And it's good to see MMA going back to Kilkenny as well. So fair play to the lads for making that happen. Looking back at the last 2 weeks is kind of what we label this kind of segment, and there was no bigger story in the last 2 weeks other than Dean Barry's UFC debut when he took on Mike Jackson the weekend before last. And I mean, yeah, we had plenty to say before the fight, and obviously, you know, we've seen what happened there. Dean lost via disqualification by an accidental eye poke, eye gouge, and yeah, I mean, it was very.
Do you think it was accidental, Ian? Because, and the reason I asked that is because a lot of people within Irish MMA are saying, "Well, this is a gouge. This is a gouge." What do you think?
Well, look, I say a gouge because it did look like a gouge, but it was like the question is it accidental? I would. You know, I had to look back at it twice because it was an unusual hand placement. When you're posting in fights, you do that with your hands open. So basically when someone says that they're posting, it means, you know, you're trying to gauge some space to get away from your opponent. A lot of the time when you're sparring and posting or catching jabs in the fight game, you're doing it with your hand open. You know what I mean? So when you're doing it with your hand open in a boxing glove, you know, you're catching jabs, you're pushing away from your opponent, you're pawing away other punches as well. You're doing it with an open hand. That's what you're taught to do. Unfortunately, that doesn't kind of translate over too well to mixed martial arts gloves where your fingers are exposed. So, I mean, that's why we see so many eye pokes in mixed martial arts, is because, you know, when you're in there, you're in that flow. You're doing what you're being taught to do. So, I mean, he was unlucky in that he was going for the finish and he was trying to post away from Mike Jackson, kind of just push his face away, and you know, the eye went into the socket. There's no doubt in that at all. And I mean,
yeah, to me, it just looked very sloppy. I personally didn't think it was on purpose, but I thought it was just very, very sloppy.
It was very sloppy, and it was a mistake. You know what I mean? And he'll admit that. I'm sure Dean will admit that it was a mistake as well. Because for me, I don't. Why would it be on purpose when he had Mike Jackson's back against the wall? Like he was landing some good shots. He was trying to get him out of there, and you know, Jackson was coming to try and close the distance to get away from those shots. And you know, like looking at a video in slow motion doesn't, or just looking at the actual foul itself doesn't kind of paint a picture of how the sequence went. You know, you want to be looking at the minute sequence and everything like that before, where he was landing some damage. But you know, it was unfortunate for Dean. I mean, we were asking a bunch of questions before the fight, and we still have a bunch of questions right now. And I think overall, I've been thinking about it, and I think, you know, overall I thought Dean kind of put himself into a lose-lose. Not that he put himself into it, but it was a lose-lose situation for Dean. You can't blame him for taking the fight. If he was offered a fight, who wouldn't? Anybody would. But I mean, you're going in there with someone like Mike Jackson, who's known to kind of play act a little bit, and you know, even if he went out there and knocked out Mike Jackson in round one, people were going to come back and say he should have done that in round one. If he didn't do it, people were going to say he should have done it in round one. Couldn't he do it in round one if he did it in round three or round two or round three? I mean, you know, it's kind of a lose-lose situation, which is unfortunate for Dean, but no one could have imagined it finishing like this, which was absolutely disastrous. And, you know, it was unfortunate for Dean, unfortunate that the fight played out that way. And, you know, maybe I'll bring it and I'll ask your guys' opinion on what I said, and then maybe we'll talk about what's next for Dean. I'll go to you first, Caoilte.
Just to touch on what you said there, do you know what you're on about when you're posting away and you're, you know, pushing the hand up? The one picture that kept, I have to look at it a few times to be like, do you know, if he's pushing the head away, when you're pushing with an open, you know, when your fingers are exposed, you'd push with the palm and your fingers would be up. They wouldn't be like this, like a claw almost. So like, I'm looking at the picture now And it's like, you'd imagine, so his hand's like this. You'd imagine, so hand be like open palm, fingers out. Instead, like the fingers are like curled in. That's where it's a bit like, I don't know, could have happened by accident, just whatever. But it seems as though there might have been, I don't even know. That's not a good look at all. Like, to have your fingers that in someone's eye is just awful.
Yeah, it's definitely I'd label it as an unnatural hand position in that, but he was trying to grab a hold of him as well at that stage, just in a wild exchange. I mean, look, we cannot ignore the fact that there was also 2 fouls before that as well, which doesn't look good either. And you know what I mean? It just, I honestly couldn't have seen this apart from Mike Jackson knocking him out. I think this couldn't have went any worse for Dean, to be honest, on his debut. What's your thoughts on everything, Andy?
The whole fight was a mess. It was a complete another mess. Dean came in here. He was kind of, as you said, Ian, it was kind of Dean Barry against the world in a way, because nobody understood why he was signed to the UFC. And we've talked about this. I'm so sick of talking about why is Dean Barry signed to the UFC, but it's still, that question is still there now. And it will probably remain there for forever, really, if we're being honest. He had to go in here and put him away, and he didn't. First, now look, the first, I'm going to be honest, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, and I have never trained, but this is my opinion. The first 2 minutes looked absolutely horrific, from both fighters. Now, to be fair to Dean, he is coming in. He's a lot of pressure on him, and he still only is 3-0, or it was 4-1. Coming into this, was he 4-1, 5? I can't even remember now.
4-1.
Yeah, 4-1 coming into this. He was winging shots. Mike Jackson was winging shots, and to be honest, like the first 2 minutes up until the dick kick, it didn't look like Dean Barry was necessarily going to win this fight. Mike Jackson was having success. He was, neither of them really looked like they were going to win the fight. It was a kind of a case of, Jesus, this is loose, this is wild. Dean was throwing these huge haymaker shots that were missing half the time. Mike Jackson was kind of slipping and check hooking them on occasion. It just looked very, very sloppy. It didn't look like it was a UFC quality fight. Now, after
I put that down to 2 things, and one of them is what Dean said himself, and that was nerves.
Yeah.
Nerves, and also the pressure that he put on himself as well. And you put that pressure on yourself by going in there with the expectation of putting Mike Jackson out of there in round 1, getting that win, getting that flashy knockout win, and talking the big game, and saying that you're going to move away to China if you don't get the win. That puts a lot of pressure on you, whether you like it or not. Huge
pressure.
You know what I mean?
Fair, like I know a lot of people will ask, well, why is he even in there? Like, he shouldn't be in the UFC, but he hasn't looked like that in his previous fights, to be fair to like he's never come out and just winged shots like that. So I think a lot of that was him just literally going out and thinking, right, I'm going to put this lad away in 30 seconds and that'll shut everyone up. But when you go out there and start throwing wildly, and you are nervous because it's your UFC debut and whatever else, I think there was no
doubt about it that nerves got the better of him in that fight, and that's why we seen those wild shots. That's why we seen him winging it. And it would have been interesting to see if he had even if he didn't get Mike Jackson out there, he had Jackson's back against the wall before the foul happened. And I think, it would have been interesting to see if he had got him out of there, or I would have liked to see him getting in there, because I know Andy Ryan would have got him in there and got him settled in between rounds, and told him maybe to pick his shots a little bit more and stop headhunting. That's what I saw with Dean. He was headhunting there, and he was doing it because, number one,
after the dick, he did seem to calm down a bit after the dick kick, and he did. Like, let's be honest, he was putting it on Mike Jackson. Now that's what he should have been doing, is the problem. Like, he should have been doing that from the very start. But that was the expectation that was put on him by everyone. So it's just, we're back to square one.
Like, look at it. Why did he get signed is the question that everyone was asking. But whatever, he was signed and everything like that. But
it's not his fault again.
No, it's not. He took the opportunity that was given to him. But in hindsight, maybe experience is a big thing, no matter who you're in there against, and you can't hide the fact that you're inside the UFC, you're inside that octagon, all the eyeballs are on you, everyone is talking about it, and
but
a lot of the talk that came after the fight
of that performance vindicates everyone who was critiquing the signing, who was critiquing Dean. It vindicates, like, that just gives everyone ammo to say, well, look at that. Like, that's why we're saying it.
Yeah.
What do you do with him now? To be honest, that's my next one, because we're talking about the performance. Performance is one thing,
I think
but like
you have to give him another fight. Like,
not Mike Jackson. It's just you just lose
like,
situation.
The UFC have whether you like Dean, don't like Dean, whether you think he should be in the UFC, whether you don't think he should be in the UFC, none of this was his fault. So the UFC have put him in this position where they've built this fight up for 18 months through, he was obviously signed and not signed, and then that happens. And like, is that like, I'm looking at it from an Irish MMA perspective, it just makes a mockery of Irish MMA to an extent. I think I need a clarity, or I need a finality to either Dean goes out there and wins and then he continues to fight and then we see how he gets on and maybe he wins and maybe he loses. But to have him like this whole fucking saga for 18 months and then a DQ over Mike Jackson and then that's it, that wouldn't sit well with me. Now the counterpoint would be, well, does he, off the back of that performance where he ended up with a DQ win over Mike Jackson, does he deserve another shot in the UFC? And if the answer is probably no, but because of the scenario, it's such an odd scenario where, I don't know, it stresses me out.
I think you give him a shot at lightweight. That's another thing. I mean, is like, if you wanted to, you took the fight with Mike Jackson at welterweight, and he had been saying, this is not my natural weight, and I was like, well, you could. Like, for me, I was like, for Dean,
do you make the rematch?
You could, well, not for the I don't make the rematch with Mike Jackson. I'd like to see Dean move down to lightweight and take on an up and comer, give him someone from the Contender Series. So I know, Andy, you were talking about Paddy Pimblett. I think that's a horrible idea, to be honest. And personally, and you're entitled to your opinion, I think that's a horrible idea for Dean. I don't think that fight would go well for him. I think the experience gap is absolutely colossal. And I couldn't see it. I'd like to see Dean come in there with maybe someone. Look, if the UFC want to do that, match him with someone with the same amount of experience that he has, someone from the Contender Series. Give him another shot at the lightweight division. But I'd like to see him get another shot. I think you can talk about him deserving another shot, but I think it's more out of closure and clarity for us. We want to see him back in there again. Let's see him fighting at a more natural weight. Let's see him fighting against a real fucking fighter too, not Mike Jackson.
Get him on the London card.
Against who? You need someone, like, that's going to be full of lads from around Wales, Scotland, England. Like, you can't imagine they're going to put an Irish lad in the card unless it's against one of those, and they're way more experienced. Unless you want to throw him to the deep end.
Well, he's in there now, so he's going to have to fight these guys. That's my opinion.
This is the thing. It's like it's sink or swim for me. Like, what are we doing here? Like, honestly, what are we doing here? Like, I don't understand anything that's going on right now with this entire situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. And like, I mean, you get the win, you build off a win, but it didn't work out that way. So I guess the whole result of the Jackson fight just kind of threw a spanner into the works on everything. And some of the reaction that came Dean's way online after wasn't too nice, and you don't like to see that. And
I'm hesitant to even talk. Like, I know I've given my honest opinions here because they're, and as of you guys, because there are opinions, but like, there's the other side of, Dean's deactivated his social media like 5 or 6 times now, and he's gotten a lot of abuse over the last kind of 18 months. So yeah, I
don't like to see that either. I mean, but the sad reality of the situation in this sport is that you're going to have to be able to deal with those kind of reactions, especially when you're in. Yeah, it's part and parcel, and I don't agree with it. I don't like it, but it is part and parcel of it, and you're going to have to kind of to do something to kind of mentally prepare yourself for reaction, whether it be good reaction or bad reaction, because you can't listen to all the praise that's thrown your way either, because that can affect you negatively as well, just as much as the negative stuff. It's a tough one.
There's a difference also between abuse and there's like, I'm after calling the first 2 minutes of his fight horrific. That's my honest opinion. I think that's a fair assessment of what the first 2 minutes for a UFC level fight. I think that's a fair assessment. Now, and that's, I realize I don't fight or anything like that, but that's my honest opinion on it. So there is a difference between.
He pretty much said that himself about, like, he said that he didn't perform close to his standards, and I believe him when he says that. he didn't perform close to his standards. But we need to see him in there again and give him a chance to prove that he can fight up to his standards, and then we'll find out what his standards are and how they match up to the rest of the UFC roster and the rest of the UFC talent. That needs to happen, and hopefully it does. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has anything to add before we move on. But we wish the best for Dean, and hopefully we'll get to see him back in there in the UFC and see him competing against some good competition and give himself the chance to prove himself. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes down. I know he called for a crack on the London card in July, and I don't see any problem with that. Let's see if it happens, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk to him down the line. Moving on from that one, another fight that was announced for Cage Warriors Belfast was the return of Andy Taz Young against Scott Malone. Of course, a fight that was supposed to happen last year, a cage conflict, but fell through. Andy returns and gets his crack at another chance at Cage Warriors against Scott Malone, which is a great fight. And we won't break down that fight too much. We'll talk to the man himself and get his thoughts and his kind of mindset going into this fight. Andy's been around for a long time, and it's going to be great to get a chance to pick his brain on how he's feeling right now. So with that being said, let's go to the interview with Andy Taz Young.
And now we are joined by the man himself, Andy Young, returning after 3 years. How are you getting on, Andy?
Great. No, thank you guys very much for having me. And yeah, it's been 3 years, but I've been staying busy. I haven't been sitting idle. I've been very active, just with a lot of different projects. Obviously, everyone is affected badly with COVID and lockdowns, but we managed to make the most of it and got my gym up and running with my partner, Arnold Dos Santos. Really great teammate, good friend, and my business partner of mine. So we set up Hybrid MMA, and we started just before the lockdown, but we built it whilst we were closed, and we came back kind of better than ever and got married. And I also we ran our own first show as well, so it's been a really busy 3 years. So I think now it's just the perfect time to be getting back into MMA, and it's at the right time, I think. So big believer everything happens for a reason, and now I feel better than ever, and just like a new lease of life and just ready to get back after it.
And was there any talks of returning during that 3 year break at all, or has it just come about at the right time now?
Yeah, so I was actually set to fight in September. It was I think I was so eager to take it, and it ended up being 3 weeks before my wedding. And to be fair, Stacey was quite cool about the whole thing, but fate kind of intervened, and I got injured. I got a hand injury. I couldn't really train for most of the camp, and then I thought it would clear up, and then about 3 weeks before I got COVID, got it quite bad, and kind of sapped all the cardio out of me. So between that and the wedding, and then my training partners not being available, game with injuries and sicknesses and stuff, it just wasn't working out. And now I've got the same matchup against Scott Malone, but now it's going to be in Cage Warriors in June. So the matchup was definitely fated to happen, but now it's going to be at a much better date, and I'll be in a much better place.
And obviously, you've been around for so long now, and you see how the sport's kind of developed over, I'd say, even the 3 years that you've been out, I guess. What's it been like to look at it from the outside from a change instead of being in the thick of it like you were before?
Well, I mean, it's so impressive. And what's happened now is all these 14, 15-year-olds from a few years ago, they're now 18, 19, and they're absolute animals. And now growing up in the sport, you can just see that. I mean, the kids are growing up now with all the advantages of the internet and YouTube and everything. So there's just so much technique and knowledge being shared on a daily basis. There's so many gyms, so much high quality coaching. I mean, when I started, and a lot of people around my kind of era would agree that the highest belt at the time was say to be purple belt, and even that was a big thing. There was no one that came here from the country doing MMA at a high level at all. So there was always doubts, could you even make it? But now these kids are growing up going, well, you can. There's a pathway for it. The amateur scene's got all these different routes they can go. And, with that belief system plus the high quality of training, you can really see them just excelling. And it's scary. I mean, there's there's plenty of young ones now that are only 19, 20 and giving me a hard time in the gym. So it's going to be a really bright and scary future to see how good these guys are going to get in the next few years.
It's always hard to keep in with the young pups. We feel the same. I play a bit of soccer as well. I'm struggling to keep up with the young lads as well. I'm sure you are as well. Like, what would be the biggest, Andy? You've been around. You've been fighting since the late noughties, really, 2008, 2009. In your opinion, what has been the transition of Irish MMA for you in that period of time from when you started off to where you're at right now? Obviously, like you said, there's a higher level of grappling and coaching and stuff like that. There was a little bit of lull in Irish MMA when it came to shows and stuff like that, but that seems to be taking off right now. And, you mentioned something at the start of the interview saying that this is the perfect time for you. So it's all kind of falling into place. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like I said before, I do really believe things happen in the right way at the right time. And, for me, like, I'm coming back at this, and I know we're said, obviously, the younger generation now with all the skills and ability and knowledge they have, but I guess the strengths that we have being a bit older is now that kind of maturity, more control over ego, over emotions. It's much easier for me to not really give a shit what other people think, but when you're in your early 20s, a lot of time you do, and I'm past that now. I want to be competing just to really do it for myself, really enjoy it, and just have fun, just doing what I'm basically born to do in my mind, and just enjoy the process. And definitely when I was younger, there was a lot of people I wanted to prove wrong. And again, like, to go over what I kind of said there was no one that really made it massively, and so there was that doubt, and a lot of people had said, no, this isn't a sport you can do, you can't make a career out of this, you'll never make it. And there was always a chip on my shoulder, I'll prove them wrong. And then as the years developed, and you could see there was a pathway, and once I got kind of the world titles behind me, I kind of was like, I've done what I told you, what you said I couldn't do, I've now done. So it kind of ticked a big box for me. And that's kind of almost one of the worst things. It was a good thing, but also one of the worst things is that it kind of took away a lot of hunger too, because I accomplished such a big goal of mine. And that's one of the driving forces behind the start of my career, was to prove everyone wrong. And then when I did that, it kind of proved, that point. So it was to reestablish new goals now going forward. And I think I never really took the time to reassess that, but now I have. And now I've, getting to it for the right reasons and for the joy and love of the sport.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, is that kind of something that you focused on during this period of time that you spent outside of the cage? And just kind of, I'm curious to get your thought process. Like, you've always took the tough fights. Before, you're coming off the back of a losing streak right now, and I'm just wondering, like, what was your thought process coming off the back of that losing streak, and what's your motivation right now? To get back in there? I'm sure it's to get. I'm sure you think that you're good enough to get those wins, and is it that kind of chip on your shoulder again to kind of prove to people that you can get in there, you can get those wins and perform at the highest level? Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, it's definitely an element, but it's a much lesser element to maybe prove people wrong. Again, it's that's always going to be something said. There's always going to be people that kind of have a doubt in you or like to kind of trash talk and troll you, but I'm not so concerned about that. It's more just I want to prove it to myself. There's a lot more I want to accomplish, and yes, there was a lot of losses there in a row, and like I said, I never really backed down from a tough fight, and I think that was again kind of ego speaking, but also circumstances too. I mean, I was trying to do it as a full-time career, and unfortunately, especially 3-4 years ago, it was extremely hard. It's getting a little bit more manageable now, but there would just not be the money in it to make it as a career. I mean, I was on a skiing holiday and was in the airport after eating croissants and drinking wine for a few weeks, and got offered to fight Ali Bagantinov in Slovakia, obviously ex-UFC title contender. Yeah. And I said yes, why not? I would just die for an opportunity like that. So give myself essentially 2 weeks to get in shape and fight one of the top flyweights in the world. And for sure, the opportunity to do that was great.
and the payday for that was good. So that definitely influenced my decisions. The other fights, for example, there's going to be, most of them were for world titles or world title contenderships. Short notice, flew off to Australia within 6 days. So none of the fights were really one-sided. You know, I got maybe caught in a submission, or it was just a decision loss, or it could have maybe gone either way. But that's the way, you know, the dice roll. But it was different if I was on a losing streak and I was getting outclassed in every fight. So in my mind, I'm still right up there, and now I want to come back and just show it completely refocused. And I don't have any stress on my shoulders now, and that's what my wife Stacey said. The last fight I had, I was just very stressed. I was fighting in there for the wrong reasons. And now it's like, no, I'm fighting for the right reasons.
Sorry, was there ever a tiny? I think you kind of answered this question. Retirement never came into the question for you. It was just a different mentality that you wanted to approach fights with. Yeah,
and it was a frustrating thing too, because obviously you're a few years out from the sport, and after a few losses, and you know, some people started to say that to me, and it was like, no. And I think the whole thing about when you get into, say, your 30s and people start to mention retirement, and I've talked to a lot of sporting people, and you know, my theory on it is really just people get fed up with injuries, or you know, they're at a point where they've got a wife, they've got kids, they've got a mortgage, they've got all this. There's not much money in the sport. They've got injured, they've maybe lost one or two. They don't really see the same future, so they stop. You know, but for me now, especially with the gym, you know, I've got a kind of good kind of career set out there with that, you know, especially for after the fights. But I've got a steady stream of income now. I don't need to worry so much about fighting just for money. And I've got everything in place in the rest of my life. So now I can fight with a clear mind and clear focus on what I want to achieve, and to be able to fight for the right reasons, as I said there, you know.
Nice, yeah, 100%.
You mentioned there about the setting up the gym and how that gives you like a steady stream of income, and you also have the promotion as well. A lot of that, like, that's going to take a lot of coaching and a lot of like organization, especially with the promotion side of things. How do you balance that as well? And I guess what the other side of it is, what made you set up? I'd say the promotion, the gym is one thing, but the promotion's the other. Like, to go all out and like delve yourself into the world of MMA, all sorts of ways.
I know. Well, again, I've been very lucky. Arnold DeSantos, you know, like I said, he's my business partner now at the gym, and great friend. But he's, you know, as motivated or more motivated than me to kind of succeed in, you know, a lot of things, and his drive for the gym and pushing things, and the two of us bounce off each other, and having that person there to really be behind, you know, really makes a massive difference. So we've been able to push, you know, everything in the training, in the gym, you know, running the classes and doing the show. So I definitely couldn't have done it by myself, not a chance. And, you know, it's really just because of him as well. The two of us have worked together so well. You know, we can cover each other for classes, we can help each other with business talk, we can help each other with the ideas for shows and then running of it. So it kind of splits out all the work in half. So that way it kind of really helps. And then I'm very close to the gym. I'm only 5 minutes away. So it's a big, you know, difference for me now. So I can go down, get my own training in. And then, like I said, the younger guys that I'm training are coming up the ranks and really giving me some good training and good sparring. So I've got a lot on my doorstep now. So I think the training's a lot more manageable.
And with the promotion side of things, what's the plan moving forward? I know when I spoke to you last time that it was all novice fights, and the plan is to actually start adding more full amateur fights. Was there any idea if you add professional fights sometime in the future as well?
For sure, 100%. I mean, this idea was just to test the waters, the show, and we wanted to do that kind of novice to stepping in and competing in you know, a short span of time, and just allow people that avenue to compete. So, you know, the show went, you know, fantastically. We couldn't have been any happier with it. And the level was very, very good, especially just for such a short period of time of the guys training. But the next show we're doing, we're going to do it in August. We're going to do a 2-day event. We're going to have amateurs. We're going to look to get an amateur title going, have a tournament style, you know, the old school kind of 4-man tournament, make things exciting. And we want to keep building and definitely get a pro kind of fight down the line on the card and build it as, you know, ideally one of the kind of forefront promotions in the country. So just another, goal I've definitely had from the start, because the sport is everything to me, and martial arts is. So there's a lot of boxes to tick, not just in fighting careers, but like, I'll always be around the sport. So if it's not fighting, it will be teaching, coaching, promoting, definitely.
Andy, if I could just hop in there, Caoilte, for a sec. Some of the younger fighters that you will have coming up through your gym and everything like that, we spoke to Chris Fields, and he has an idea what way he would like to see his young fighters come through the sport. You're a guy who's came up through it, and you took the tough fights. You fought in those championship fights as well. What are you saying to your young fighters coming through the gym? What do you believe is the right kind of path to forge before, on the amateur level, maybe before you make your pro debut?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's a fine balance between taking all the hardest fights to start with, and not to say easy fights, because no fights are easy, but just to take the fights that maybe aren't as risky. But I mean, for example, Joseph Beck, he's, one of my kind of top kind of students, and, now assistant coaches at the gym. And he's, I've been such a, honor to kind of see him progress. But he, for example, we threw him in at the very start, but we threw him in telling him, like, you can take a really hard fight, or you can take a bit of an easier one, but I want to make sure his mind's in the right place. So I think it's more dangerous to go in, have a false sense of how good you are, and lose and be caught up about it. But if you're well aware of kind of the dangers of what a loss can kind of do to your mentality, but as long as you're willing to go in and put it on the line, there's, sometimes the, fortune favors the brave that way. You're worth putting it on the line and going for it. So kind of a bit of a mix with the old school mentality. Just, it's amateur, it's all for experience. Take it all in and just, definitely get some tough fights, but again, don't fight just out of obligation. So what's happening now is that I said Joe will fight, but take a good amount of time off and only train and get ready for a fight when he's very, very hungry to do it. Whereas, myself, it was just you fight, then you fight again, and you just did it every few months because you were offered one, so you took it. So he's been a lot wiser than what I was, and now just giving himself the time. So, definitely challenge yourself, get a good fight at amateur, to, test your skills, get as much experience as you can. And with wins over the top guys at the start, you're going to know where you're at and the level you're at, rather than wins over maybe the lesser boys, and then you're always questioning how good you are. And if you take a step up to pro, you might have a lot more doubt in your head about how good you are. But yeah, again, only training or fighting when you have the real desire to do that and being smart about it.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's the fine balance, isn't it? It's finding the right challenge at the right time. And I guess the ultimate answers to all those questions aren't found out until you get in there and actually compete. So, it's a fine balancing act. But yeah, I know, I'm sure that you will give some good guidance to your up and coming guys, like getting in there and training and getting to that, if you want to call it, grassroots level. It must surely help you as a fighter as well, and help your progression, especially at this stage of your career as well.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, it lights a lot of fire as well, when you see your students competing, or like you said, the grassroots, and there's so much hunger in the guys, and they really want to prove themselves, and they really want to get out and show who they are. So it definitely motivates me. And as well as that, being a coach, sometimes I have to really lead by example. So it pushes me to set the tone, set the pace with a lot of stuff. And, I got that a lot from my head coach, Rodney Moore, who always leads by example, is always in training and sparring with everyone. And so it is a motivator for me a lot of ways that way too. So
nice. Just a quick one there. You mentioned being as a coach and having your fighters, having them fight when they're hungry for it. I think one thing we took from, like, let's say, use the example of the Chris Fields interview, was some coaches and some gyms would prefer to go down the IMMAF route, where they have athletes competing at IMMAF competition, which would be international, and some others prefer not to do that. Would you have a preference on that? And are you considering joining IMMAF, or would you consider it in the future?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, that's someone that, like the likes of Joe I was talking about earlier, I want him to go that route. Now that he's really tested himself against some of the top guys, he's won a title. That's the way I want to push him. Get the European World Championships, all that. It's such a joy to now see that there is an avenue for fighters now. You know, obviously there was nothing for us going through it, and my decision to go pro was really just, well, it was essentially my decision. There was no, you know, set route to go through. If you wanted to go pro, you just went pro, and it was just because, well, I just came off a knockout win, and I couldn't help think if that was a pro, I would have got paid for it. So yeah, like it was just kind of 4 amateur fights, went pro just because I wanted a little bit of money, and you know, obviously thought I could just jump in and it wouldn't matter. And the levels weren't a massive jump back then either. So now that there's an actual avenue, it's definitely worth following. But again, it's, you know, it's a business now as well as an entertainment business. So a lot of guys are learning that, and it's important to kind of build that profile up. And the IMMAF route is a really good way of doing that. So that is definitely the way we're looking to kind of push things going forward for the likes of Joe.
And as for yourself now, obviously signed to Cage Warriors to fight in Belfast. How did that come about? How did the Cage Warriors come back into the picture, and what's it like to fight in Belfast again?
Yeah, so Cage Warriors kind of contacted my head coach Rodney Moore, and I had said, Rodney, you know, everything's kind of in place now for me to make a return, and I'm good to go. So, you know, he's got a lot of faith and belief in me, and I think he really pushed Cage Warriors. And, you know, I've got a good relationship with them. Again, it took a lot of short notice fights for them, or fought some of the top guys, and I've always put on a good, you know, show and good performance. So I think they've been very grateful for the opportunity from them, and I think they've been excited to see me get back in there. So, yeah, that, you know, they were obviously want me to kind of get back in and compete in hometown, home city. And the last time I got that win in the SSE in Belfast was one of the best nights ever. Obviously got that second world title, and it's just going to be an absolute joy for me to get back in there. And by far, just everything I've been kind of focusing on in the last few months in my mind, just this is the opportunity I've been waiting for to really, you know, reignite my career and put on such a good performance and just get back out there. And this is the big push that I want, and I'll be making the most of the opportunity.
And Scott Malone, like, he's no slouch. He's he's top fighter in the UK and moving down to flyweight now as well. Is the idea to fight Scott, stay with Cage Warriors and look for a title? Or are you just taking on a fight by fight basis?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in my mind, I would love to stay with Cage Warriors and build that up. I think after, especially like you said, Scott Malone's a very high level competitor. Has done a lot of bantamweight. Now dropping to flyweight, this will be a really good win to get over him and put me right back in the picture again. So if I get a few wins following this, that should kind of get me in good title contention, I would imagine. I think given my background and what I've managed to kind of do, once I kind of show that I'm back and I'm better than ever, I think I'll be able to hopefully push for that title very soon. And I think 3 world titles would be a really good thing in my legacy, and you know, would definitely help me to, you know, advance the career much faster. But I mean, I'll not say no to other shows, but that's what I'm focusing on right now. Stick with Cage Warriors, but like I said, fate might intervene. We never know what might happen. But no, I'm happy enough with the route at the moment, and I'm not pressured for time or anything. I want to make sure I take each fight at the right time.
How do you see the fight with how do you see the fight itself going with Scott? How do you see yourself matching up with him? Obviously what Caoilte said, he's a very top talent coming from the UK and moving down in weight class as well. Would it be a thing where you feel that you're going to try and push the pace and see what he is, if he does feel comfortable at the weight, or how do you approach
well, that's it. You know, I definitely love the matchup. We were obviously scheduled to fight back in September, and you know, I was a bit gutted obviously with everything. But I was so happy to get this fight going again, and I do think I match up very well with him. And if anyone knows me, they'll know the pressure fighting is something I look for. So it's a good matchup, and again, if hopefully he'll cut weight the right way, but for sure that can obviously be a test to your cardio if you're cutting and you don't do it correctly. So I'll be looking to put on a good pace, but take my time at the same time and really just show all the skills that I've now developed and have fun in there. But definitely think this is a good matchup, and we'll put on a really good performance and fight for everyone.
Nice. What part of your game do you feel that is after coming on so much more, Andy? Let alone the last 3 years, say, since what have you been working on? You're a guy who just goes out there and puts on great entertaining fights all the time. Do you think, do you like doing that? Is that what you see yourself as a fighter, or do you think that you need to be maybe a little bit more methodical, or just like not get drawn into these kind of battles and fights, and just let your showcase your skills a little bit more, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, like I said, with the last fights, there was a lot more pressure, and as a couple of losses build up, there's more and more pressure on your shoulders, and at least a lot more hesitation. I do felt I hesitated a lot in the last couple, so my real goals for this is just to let things go. In terms of skills that have developed, I would say overall fight IQ is much higher. So just feel like the fight and just really let things go, and not worry about anything really. Just no hesitation, just go for it and just enjoy the fight, and whatever happens. But the fight IQ is there, so I know I'll read the fight well and I'll respond the right way, and I want to push that pace and just enjoy the show.
Indeed, and I'm sure it'll be exciting as well, just to fight in front of the Belfast crowd. I'm sure you'll have a lot of support there as well, hey?
Yeah, definitely. The Belfast crowd's, just always incredible, and now especially with the whole support of Hybrid and all the guys in Next Gen 2 and all the other fans, friends and family, it'll really blow the roof off the place. So cannot wait. And I think just the walkout, every time I picture it, I just keep smiling, and I'm just in a very happy, good place to be competing again.
That's great to hear, Andy. I'm delighted, and we're excited to see you getting back in there and performing as well. On June 25th, the SSE Arena in Belfast, Andy Taz Young will be taking on Scott Malone, and that's going to be a hell of a fight. It's a great card. I'm delighted that you're a part of it, Andy. It's great to see you back in there again. We wish you the best. Thank you so much for coming on to speak with us today. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we can do it again sometime down the line as well.
Oh man, no, thank you guys so much. Really, really appreciate the time, and again, thank you very much for the kind words, and I'll make sure to put on a great fight, and always love to be with you guys and get a good chat.
And that's it. That Andy Taz Young, thanks very much for joining us today. Always great to hear from him, and we wish him the best in his upcoming fight at Cage Warriors Belfast. He's always in an exciting fight, so it'll be great to see him back in there and taking on some stiff competition in Scott Malone. All right, guys. Some upcoming news, upcoming fights that is coming our way. The first one I'd like to talk about is one that's coming right around the corner. It's happening in a couple of days, and that's Myles Price versus Anthony Pettis. An absolutely monster fight for Magic Myles Price. I know I was on the interview with him. He said it himself. I didn't know whether to call him Splinter. I didn't know whether to call him Magic. He wants to be known as Magic Myles Price again. He's lost that Splinter moniker that was put on him, or that he put on himself, I guess, in around the Peter
The
Caoilte
SPG
fight.
war is dead.
Yeah.
The war is over.
That's it. He's put that one to bed. But Myles is coming in here against former UFC champion Anthony Pettis, May 6 PFL lightweight bracket. And I think it's a great fight for Myles. I think that it's a winnable fight for Myles. And I think, it's just a perfect storm of events. And I'm really excited to see how he gets on. The fight will be on this Friday night. You'll be able to watch it on Channel 4 over the UK and Ireland. It'll be available on ESPN, I believe, stateside. But a really big fight for Myles, Andy, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely huge. You're going in, not often Irish fighters are getting fights like this. This is fantastic to see. And what a turnaround. Myles has had an up and down career, but relatively inconsistent record. But then when he's on, he's really, really on. And his last fight, what is that, 2 years ago now or longer, against Peter Caoilte?
Yeah, it is. And we talked about it, and I know Sean and Graham have talked about it too. It kind of, it was the big question around Andy was, where was Myles after that fight? Because he kind of disappeared. Obviously, he had some injuries to deal with. He had some personal issues to deal with as well. But it was kind of, to me, I don't know how you feel. It kind of felt like a little bit of a missed opportunity. And he had a couple of things to say about Bellator. I believe that he believed himself that he wasn't being matched up accordingly after getting that win. He felt that with Bellator that Peter Caoilte was getting rewarded with better fights, whereas he was being rewarded with an undercard fight on a London card, and he felt he should have been higher up the card. So there's a little bit of over and back, and overall he was disappointed with his treatment of Bellator, and it kind of left a bitter taste in his mouth.
Yeah, I was really interested or intrigued to listen to that interview he did with him, and for him to speak about all of those things, because it's kind of what, like, I'm not surprised in a way. Like, Miles isn't an SBG fighter. We know what Peter Caoilte brings to these events with regards to crowds and the atmosphere around his walkouts, and of course his fights. Like the fight against Ryan Scope was incredible. Like fighting Patricky Pitbull. Miles Price is a different type of fighter, and also I think maybe not what Bellator were looking for with these Irish events. I don't know if that's fair to say, but that's kind of my read on it. But he stood his ground, and fair play to him, because here he is now fighting an ex-UFC champion, and at a time where Pettis is probably on the decline of his career, and as you said, it's a winnable fight. Now I'd be very interested to see how Miles looks when he gets in there. I think it's brilliant that he's over in Germany training with the guys in UFD. He looks like I've seen him put up kind of vlog updates almost on his Instagram, and he's been put through the ringer. You see him with a black eye every second day and cuts and bruises, and that's the type of camp you need to come through. Would be my guess for a huge fight like this. So very, very excited to see how Miles gets on, and a massive opportunity for him, and some other great fights in the PFL lightweight division for him too.
Oh, absolutely. And even to be on this card, Kayla Harrison is on the card, Rory MacDonald is on the card as well, Ray Cooper III is on the card. So this is probably the biggest PFL card of the year so far, and he's right in the mix of it too, which is great for him. And I mean, something about Miles is that in a game that kind of revolves around loyalty a lot and loyalty to your gym, Miles always spread himself out there and always was never afraid to go and train at other gyms and get new looks. And we've seen him over there at AKA. We've seen him over at UFD over in Germany. And fair play to him for doing that. But like Caoilte has a real chance in this fight. I mean, he's not just turning up to be a part of the PFL roster. Obviously, he wants to win. There's getting a good win against Anthony Pettis will give him the height of confidence. Will give him 3 points, and he is all eyes on the million. He's more focused right now on Anthony Pettis, and I think that's the right way to do it. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. The fight was originally supposed to take place on April 20th, I believe. Got pushed back a couple of weeks. Miles was happy with that, said it gave him more time to kind of cut the weight and get down to lightweight. And I fancy him, if he fights the right fight coming in here against Pettis, Caoilte, he has a good chance, doesn't he?
Completely. I think I was saying to you guys earlier that this is probably the best time to face Pettis. He's coming off 2 losses. He's at kind of the later stages of his career. Still dangerous, still a very good fighter, don't get me wrong. But if there's any time to face him, this is it. It's a massive opportunity for him, because this is a huge scalp. And it's historic if he wins. Massive. And but the only kind of, I guess, worry, if anything, is ring rust, because it's been like the last time that Miles Price fought, COVID-19 didn't exist. Anthony Pettis has fought 6 times since that. This game can catch up on you quick. You can do all the training in all these places, but that in-cage experience can go amiss. So that's the one thing I'd be a little bit wary of, but I still think that, considering where he's been, who he's been training with, that this could be the perfect time. He's had breaks before, he's come back, he's won, so it might suit him. And this tournament style could actually suit him as well, because we get to see him more active over the course of the year.
And it's also the toughest test of his career by a mile, right?
100%. Toughest test on paper for sure. I mean, the questions coming into this fight is, where's Anthony Pettis' head at? You know what I mean? He's been around the block. He's earned his stripes. He's earned his money. Obviously, still has the hunger to compete. But yeah, he's on a losing streak right now, and I'm wondering. I think if Miles fights this fight smart and doesn't get caught too much into boxing exchanges. Doesn't allow Pettis to fight with these kicks on the outside. I think basically if Miles can come in here and carbon copy the game plan that he carried out against Peter Caoilte, I think he has a right good chance of getting a win here. Now, this is just the same chance that Pettis might go out and he might catch him too, but Miles does have a good striking pedigree as well, even though we may have not seen it in his last couple of fights. But what really we have noticed in Miles is the work over at AKA, and his grappling and his wrestling has really come on leaps and bounds, and we saw that in the Caoilte fight as well. But I really think, if he can, what he needs to do against someone like Anthony Pettis is he has to make Pettis feel uncomfortable, take the fun out of the fight for Pettis, put his back against the wall, grind on him, just make Pettis, and we've seen it with Pettis before, Pettis is a good guy at being the hammer, but is not necessarily good at being the nail, if you know what I'm saying. He likes dishing out the punishment, and who does? Who likes taking punishment? But you know what I'm saying? You can, at this stage, I think that you can kind of take the fight away from Anthony Pettis, and it'll be exciting to see if he can do it. I don't know. Would you kind of agree with that sentiment, Andy?
Yeah, I think that's when we've seen Pettis lose in recent years, there's been a general game plan of taking it to the grappling area. I think it was the Diego Ferreira fight where it was kind of exactly that. Pettis looked kind of decent on the feet early, but then Ferreira just overwhelmed him and took it to the ground, and that was all she wrote from there. But I'm really excited to see. I don't know how this is going to play out. I'm kind of, it's when I'll sit back and be like, right, let's just see, because there's a lot of kind of questions from both sides.
There absolutely is. The question of Caoilte mentioned as well is how is the outside, like not competing for Miles. He's been outside of fighting for over 2 years now, and it'll be interesting to see how he kind of can get in here, because it's a big fight for him as well. It's a.
I think on the ring rust though, like I don't know, but this part of that has to be psychological, right? When you're going back in there, if you haven't fought in a while. And Miles comes across as a guy who's like very into, I think he's studying psychology at the moment. He's meditating. I see him putting up all the time about meditating and stuff like that. So he might be one of these guys who can just come in very zen, zone everything else out, and from a psychological perspective, maybe the ring rust won't make a difference. But then you're going to have to get and fight in the cage though. So
that's it. You get a smack, you get a smack into the nose, and all that goes out the window. But it's definitely going to be interesting. I'm excited to see Miles in there. Obviously, a Kilkenny man like myself, representing Ireland, being the first Irish fighter.
Yeah, you're only a shilly in any way. Sure.
I'm going to shill a little bit here for Miles, but it's good to see first Irish competitor ever to compete for PFL. And that's Friday, May 6th. I'm excited to see that fight. Another fight kind of announcement that was made with, one half of a fight announcement, and that was Kiefer Crosby came out and said that there's fight news imminent for him. No opponent, no promotion yet, but just a video of him training like a madman, looking to get back ready to get in there. And I'm excited.
Where do you reckon he ends up?
Brave.
Yeah. After what he said about Bellator, that he said he wants the UFC. Okay, so if he wants the UFC, is it going to be the UFC? Probably not at this stage. You're probably going to have to get a win or a win or two under your belt. Could it be the Contender Series? Possibly, but I wouldn't think so. I think if you're looking to get to the UFC, and if that's still his motivation, well, that rules out Bellator for me. A return to Bellator, which there is rumors and this and that has been going around, but I can't see it being Bellator.
I don't think it's Bellator.
Yeah, and Andy might know a little bit more about this situation than us, so he can kind of keep us steered in line.
I don't think it's Bellator. It's not Cage Warriors. I don't think it is UAE Warriors. I don't think it is KSW. Let me think who else. Probably a few others in there that it's not.
Aries.
I don't think it's Aries.
You would be thinking if the UFC is the motivation, lads, that you're going to want to put yourself onto a platform, and if you're saying it's not UAE Warriors or it's not Brave, the process of elimination of what we would have been seeing. I guess what we were seeing, where have fighters been going from SBG? We've seen a few travel over to Combatche Global stateside. That might be an option. It's hard to know. You know, France has a fight coming up there. Palahan from SBG Cork is fighting there too. Dee Begley is over there. So that there's a trend there that you might be following. And
They have
we
a
have
broadcasting
seen
deal behind them too, right? So they might have a bit of money.
100%. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, and also, even though Campbell McLaren doesn't like to admit it, well, Combatche Global is a gateway into the UFC, even though he wants to keep those fighters. But we've seen guys signed to the UFC from Combatche, and it'll be interesting to see what's next for Kiefer. But I'm glad he's back. I always love seeing Kiefer fighting there, and fighting and competing. And you know, he's a bit of crack, and he talks the talk, and he goes in there and fights his heart out every time, and there's always an exciting fight. So it's great to see him back, and I'm looking forward to seeing where he is going to be fighting and what weight too. And of course, you have lightweight and welterweight as both options for Kiefer. Where would you prefer to see him, Andy?
I think lightweight, but I don't really know. Like, the weight isn't as important for me, really. Was it his last fight was his first? Because he talked about going down to lightweight for a while, because he was always fighting these kind of catchweight fights.
Yeah, he gradually went down.
I think the Carcanyon fight was lightweight. So yeah, maybe coming in at lightweight. I mean, I'd be interested to hear from him what he prefers, like having actually fought. You know, because there was the talk of going to lightweight for a long time that never, for reasons I don't know, never kind of came to fruition until the Carcanyon fight. So, I'd be interested to see how he felt, because, you know, you don't hear from Kiefer very often. He's not a guy that does media really, but I'd be interested to hear from him as to how he felt at lightweight, and if that is the plan moving forward. But I mean, for me, I just want to see him back in there, and look, he needs a win. He's on a 2-fight losing streak at the moment, both by finish. So we need to see Kiefer back in there winning. But yeah, I'm excited to see him back. I'm interested to see where he does end up, and hopefully we see him back in there soon.
Indeed. Andy, I'll stick with you. Alan Philpott, as you spoke with him recently, he has a fight coming up soon as well. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so Alan Philpott's fighting on Saturday the 7th of May at Eternal MMA, so Eternal 65. So Alan's been training out in Australia the last number of years, and I think with COVID and everything, I don't think he's been back in a number of years, he said. It's his 50th MMA fight, so he's only 29, but it's his 50th across amateur and pro. It's his 50th fight, so I didn't realize that when I spoke to him recently doing an interview, but it kind of adds a nice little wrinkle for me, and I think Alan is really trying to establish himself as, you know, I feel like he maybe feels that he's been left behind to an extent, where, you know, he was one of these guys that was very prominent on the scene a number of years ago. He hasn't fought in over 2 years now, since he was on that One Warrior series where he was going to trying to get a contract with One. He lost in that, and we haven't seen him in MMA since. So he won a K1 fight there not too long ago. I think it was around November, December time. But he's back now, so he seems to be in very good form. He's facing a guy called Justin Van Heerden over in the Gold Coast in Australia. And yeah, look, it's just good to see him back. You know, he's kind of talks glowingly about the guys like Rhys Mckee and Paul Hughes, who he would have kind of, you know, trained a bit with, and would have been the youngsters coming up when he was on, you know, prominent on the scene in Ireland. And there's a little, like, on one hand there's like this real excitement and pride, and, you know, he loves seeing them do well, but I think there's another side where it's like, well, you know, don't forget about me. And with Alan, you know, Alan always came.
He's been around a long time, has Alan? You know what I mean? Like, he's been around for years and years. Like, he's been competing in 2008, 2009, 2010 on the MMA scene here. Like, and I'm one of the first to do so as well, on a regular basis. So he's been around the block, and, like, you know, it's not surprising, but it's understandable that, you know, he has that amount of fights garnered up, because he's been around a long time.
Yeah, and like, he was always one of these guys that had, and like, I said it to him and he agreed, like, that he had a big chip on his shoulder, and I think he's kind of maybe mellowed out a little bit. He's got a partner and a dog and all. He seems to be living a great life out in Australia. So, look, very excited to see him back. And it'll be interesting to see how he looks as well, because, you know, while he's only 29, 50 fights, that's a lot of fights, and to not have fought in the last 2 years, but I know he moved. I'm kind of going on a bit now, but one of the other things he said in the interview was that he was his own coach for a while, but now he's moved to a specific MMA gym where he's hands off. He has a proper coach, so I think that's a good move for him, and we'll see if it pays dividends now on the 7th of May.
100% great to see Alan back, and hopefully he does well, and he gets more regular fights too. It's always good to see him in action. Carl Moore, former Cage Warriors light heavyweight champion, signed recently with Bellator. It's kind of been a bit of a stop-start kind of a career for Carl. He hasn't fought since 2019, obviously picking up a split decision winner in Lee Chadwick at Bellator 227. High promise for Carl, obviously being the Cage Warriors light heavyweight champion. There was a lot of talk about him back there 2017, 2018 and 19. Obviously he hasn't fought in a couple of years now, but he's back at Bellator and he will be competing at Bellator. I'd imagine they'll show in September coming up. So it's great to see Carl back in there, isn't it, Caoilte?
Fantastic, yeah. Obviously, he's not. It's been quite a while since we've seen him. I think he's dealt with quite a lot of injuries and some setbacks. So, as you said there, stop and start. So it's great to see him back in there, and hopefully we get a really good fight. I think he was booked back in. I think his last fight was a long time ago. That was meant to be booked. Against who was it? Oh, I can't say his name. Jesus.
Andrew Shevicus.
Yeah.
Andrew
So
Shevicus.
A fight like that would be an ideal, something like that to come back with. But either way, it's just great to see him back in action and no longer on the sidelines.
Big time. Sticking with Bellator, Andy, Pedro Carvalho, Bellator 280. It's right around the corner, the Paris event. He's fighting Piotr Nedzinski. I butchered that for sure, but
close enough.
Yeah, I mean, Pedro, it's great to see Pedro back in action again. I mean, he had a tough run of it, coming off those 2 losses to Patricio Pitbull and then another one to JJ Wilson. And, I was like, I'm not going to lie, before he took on that Daniel Weichel fight, I was like, fuck, that's a tough fight coming back off 2 losses. But, fair, all credit to him. He got the unanimous decision win there at Bellator 270. He's back in here on the Paris card again. What can you tell us about his opponent and how do you see the fight going down, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, you kind of covered it there. Pedro Carvalho just seems to get dealt the most horrific matchups going. Not in a sense that he can't win them or anything, but it's just like none of them make sense. He's always been fed these killers. Now when they're ranked opponents like Daniel Weichel or something like that makes perfect sense. And we saw that great fight, very very good fight, and he came through that. But then because he was originally scheduled to fight Kasan Askabov, who's I think he's 2 brothers, the Askabov brothers, and he was. I don't know if he was multiple champion. He was definitely a champion. And I think in Eagle FC was where he was champion in. A solid fighter, but making his promotional debut. And, Pedro's a ranked featherweight, who's just beat another ranked featherweight, and you would think that they'd be pushing towards, looking to get back up towards the title contention again. That fight fell through. And now he's fighting Piotr Nedzinski. We both butchered it. I think you butchered it less than me. And again, a champion in Babylon MMA, lightweight. I think he's the lightweight champion there. So I think this is his first time coming down to featherweight here. I don't understand this matchup. I think I've said it before in a previous podcast when we talked about it. I don't get it. Like, why is he being given these guys who are just coming into the promotion who
it's
are
like a
very,
back
very
step
good.
in kind of like hype.
It's like,
and
it comes across to me like they want him to lose.
Yeah, not in skill level. This is not a back step in skill level. It's back step in like a lot of people might not be familiar with this guy, but he's coming in here off the back of 8 wins in a row. Is knocking guys out in round 1 and round 2, getting submissions. I mean, this guy is a killer. And
20 fights under his belt.
Yeah, I sometimes this is the kind of confusion, and we might have touched on it. I think this is probably what Miles might have experienced as well, where he probably felt that his true value wasn't being met. But you're going, when you're Pedro, and fair play, Pedro is going to fight anybody.
Oh, yeah.
He is going to fight anybody. He doesn't give a shit. But for me, when you're going in there and you're fighting Patricio, you lose. You fight JJ Wilson, then you take the Daniel Weichel fight, which is you go in and Daniel Weichel is no easy customer to go in and get a win against. If you had lost that fight, you would have been facing maybe 3 losses in a row, and it might have been it for him at Bellator. But you take that fight, you get the win. So I feel you should be rewarded with somebody ranked, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like why wasn't he given one of these fights when he's on a 2-fight skid? Do you know what I mean? Exactly. If they're like, if from a Bellator perspective, they're saying, right, well, he's lost his last 2 fights. Let's see if we can, he's a well-known name. He's fought for a title. Let's put in a newcomer against him, and then if they get a win off Pedro Carvalho, we can build them up. Now it's a case of after losing 2 fights, okay, we'll give him a ranked opponent, which means, okay, well then they obviously have faith that he can still hang in the title picture. He comes through that test, and now you give him it. Like it just makes no sense whatsoever to me. And fair play to Pedro, exactly what you were saying. Like a win here is a solid win, but you won't reap the rewards of that win. You're not going to get pushed up the rankings as a result of beating a promotional newcomer, in my opinion. So yeah, look, all respect to Pedro Carvalho for taking this. And this isn't to say like this is definitely a winnable fight for him. But just the matchmaking itself, I really don't get.
I'm not sure if you have anything to add, Caoilte, to what's your thoughts on the whole situation with Pedro?
While you were saying it there, I just took a quick look at where his ranking was, because I knew he was ranked, but I didn't realize he was ranked 5th. That adds a different kind of perspective, I guess, because now you're looking at a guy who's ranked 5th fighting a newcomer, and yeah, you're right. Doesn't make sense. I would have expected if you're ranked 5th, you'd be looking upwards at someone like Mads Burnell, who's just coming off a loss, for example. Because and it's still
Pedro was calling for that specific fight for a long time, and it seemed like Mads Burnell was up for it too.
That would make sense, but I don't know. And then, like, the other side of it is like, I don't know where the fight's in Paris, and it's like I presume he's going to be. There's no word if he's on the main card. Is it a main card fight? Is it a prelim fight? It's like, when you rank lads, you usually expect them to be on a main card. Maybe sometimes this stuff doesn't matter, but if you're on a main card, it usually, and you're ranked, they usually go hand in hand, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And I would expect it, and we don't know yet where he's going to be placed in the card. Tapology says prelims. God knows if that's accurate or not at the moment. That could change, Bellator. Yeah, overall, it's just a bit mad. It doesn't make sense at all.
No, it doesn't make sense to me at all either. But we'll move on to a bit of Combate Global news. And the emerging prospect, SevereMMA emerging prospect of 2021, Palahan, is back in there fighting on May 13th against Gabriel Morales. It's Paz featherweight debut. He's been fighting so far in his professional career, is 4-1 so far, and has been fighting in the lightweight division. He would have fought at featherweight at amateur, but he is coming in and making his featherweight debut and looking to put together a bit of a run at a title as well. And, Franz Malambo is getting that luxury next, and a well-deserved luxury of getting a title fight after coming through the tournament. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But just to go back on Palahan, Caoilte, a guy I love watching fight, I spoke to a few times, just a guy who goes in there and fights his heart out and puts it all on the line and is in entertaining fights and, takes a lot of damage. I said to myself, I'd like to see him going in there, and I know his coach Lee Moog has said the same thing as well, is that it's all well and good taking the damage, but he would like to see Pa go in there and have a couple of clean performances. And he's going to be bringing some big power in here into the featherweight division and in against Gabriel Morales, who is a tough cookie, tough Mexican fighter. So what's your thoughts on Pa? Are you excited to see him, and do you think he can make a run for the title in Combate?
They seem to love him over there, and I'm obviously I love watching him fight. It's fantastic, as you said, entertaining. The style seems to really suit what Combate are going for. Really exciting fights. He's not afraid to stand in the pocket and trade. Really high level striker for the amount of experience he has. And I think, as you're saying, he does take a bit of damage, but maybe the move down to featherweight will allow him to use, because he'd be a big featherweight now. So if he's moving down, it might give him that, the size advantage where he can not get into wars as much and step back, try land his punches at distance, move about, and then have clean performances, as you were saying. If the goal is to have a run at featherweight this year, for the featherweight title by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised. Especially if he gets thrown in another tournament, which I would not be surprised happening either. Considering he's been more than happy to step into these things with next to no notice.
It'd be interesting to see if he does take the tournament route. I think he's kind of proved himself on the tournament route over there already. So, that's what Combate do. And if that's what they want to do with Pat, it's all well and good. I'd like to see him get a couple of, it's hard fighting in those tournaments over there. They're 1 round, 5 minutes, and then that's it. And it's hard to kind of get a true feel of a fight in 5 minutes. And he's obviously got the win in a couple of those tournaments and has lost as well. But when we did see him in a 3-round fight, that was against Hugo Flores, or was it Isaac Ruales? When that was an absolutely barn burner of a fight. The two of them absolutely beat the hell out of each other. But I think for Pat, he's going to have to steer away from those entertaining, exciting fights and trying to get, he has the talent there. He's fantastic boxing, some great kicks, and it looks good when he gets taken down, as well as is privy to getting straight back up, and he looks comfortable and a well-rounded fighter as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in there. Andy, what's your thoughts on Pat overall?
Yeah, I'm excited to see. Palahan has kind of taken me off guard, or caught me off guard a little bit with his pro entrance, because he's come in with as you said, fighting in these tournaments. And just to your point about the tournaments,
four fights in 8 months he's fought. So he caught a lot of people off by surprise. That's
exactly. So I would be kind of the same mindset where I'd like to just see a bit of consistency is the wrong word, because he's been very consistent. He's been fighting all the time. But I'd love to know what the plan is. Is it a plan? Is it a case of trying to eventually get to the UFC? Because if that's the case, surely you don't want to always be fighting in these tournaments, and you want to have getting used to the 3 5-minute rounds all the time, preparations for fights. Getting a camp going. But he's still so young in his career, so I kind of just want to continue to see him fight. I'm excited to see him compete. I'm excited to see how he can progress over the next number of years. And I think with a lot of fighters these days, there's so much, maybe because there's so many more opportunities in different promotions that we're seeing. We're seeing fighters from Ireland fighting everywhere these days, and there's always seems to be titles on the line. And for me, a lot of the time, the titles, like I said this in a previous episode, the titles to me don't matter as much. Not that the titles themselves don't matter. Some of them do, some of them don't. But I think when you only have a few pro fights still, I just want to see a fight frequently. I just want to see the progression over the next number of fights, and then let's talk titles. Then let's have a better gauge of where you're at as a fighter, whether you're UFC caliber, whether you're going to be a champion for a European title. It makes
I would
it
kind of
difficult
look
for
at
me to
Combate
assess people.
Yeah, I kind of look at Combate though as if you wanted to label it along the same lines as Cage Warriors as well. Whereas that it is a testing point. I mean, look at Campbell McLaren will talk about this and talk about that by Combate, but it gets good viewership. It's a big following, but in my opinion, I would view Combate as a stepping stone. I think similar enough to what we have some fighters coming up, and I'm not talking about Pa getting, you were talking about his featherweight debut here. So I mean, we could be looking at him fighting another 2, 3 times, maybe even 4 times in the featherweight division.
I think part of it as well for me is when I look at, say, Cage Warriors, I'm so familiar with the other the non-Irish fighters who are on the scene, whereas when you're watching someone compete against, say, a Carlos Ochoa or a Yair Perez, I just don't know them. So I'm like, is this a good win? Is it not a good win? I don't know, and that's on me. That's not on Palahan or anyone like that. That's just on me. So I think that's why it's a little bit more tricky for me personally to be able to say, okay, well, where are we at? Is the case, okay, we're going ready for a title.
Look at it. I've seen all of his fights so far, and there has been you're not getting any walkover fights in Combate Global, that's for sure. And I mean, when you look at guys' records that he's fought, the first guy he fought was 8-3. 5-5, 4-2, 9-3, and Christian Perez beat him, who was undefeated at 7-0. Now, I mean, you look at guys that have experiences and have winning records. Doesn't necessarily mean that competition that they fought have been any good, but from what I've seen in the fights, he has been put in there with stiff competition. He's already answered a couple of questions. I mean, the fight of the year that he got over there with I think it was Isaac Ruelas was unbelievable. Like, I mean,
yeah,
you know, that was tooth and nail. The two guys, they just bit down and shot. But and the other end of the stick, you answer questions about yourself when you fight like that, but also you don't want to be fighting like that every time because you're taking too much damage. And I mean, I know that's not what you were saying, but I mean, when it comes to, like, I'm not calling that for him to get a title shot next or anything like that, but we have to remember Ian Gary got a title shot after 7 fights as well at Cage Warriors. So, I mean, I think, you know, going and winning a title and then defending that title is important, I think, in your
100%.
progress.
I think that'd be great. It'd be great. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I think just with the title talk about that, with Pats, like, because we're, I guess, a little bit more unfamiliar with how how title fights are working over there, it's hard to see what the route is. Because let's say in Cage Warriors, you knew what the route was with Ian Gary with that tournament. Before that, you knew if he beat this person and he beat this person, there's a good chance he's next. We just so unfamiliar that's very hard to gauge when he could be ready or who he has to face to get there. So it's like unknown territory in a sense. Like, does he have to win a tour? Like, look at Franz, for example. He won that tournament, and we know that lined up a title shot. Is that the method they're going to go about? It's very unclear.
It can be like Franz won that Combate, the Copa Combate, which kind of cemented. I don't know whether, like, they weren't kind of labeling that tournament as the winner got a title shot, but I mean,
I thought they were, no?
Did they? Maybe they did.
I thought after the fight they did
actually. They brought him in. Yeah, no, that's right. They did. They brought him in actually. So yeah, that's right. So maybe that's what Pa will have to do as well. Maybe they're just getting him in here for the featherweight debut, and then, you know, like Andy said, there could be a tournament there as well. But
that's what I'd like to see, though, and it shows how little I know about the opponents in Combate Global, because I just read out Gabriel Morales' previous opponents rather than Palahan's accidentally there. But what Caoilte just pointed is kind of exactly what I was poorly articulating. If we were to see, you know, Palahan going towards a title here, winning a title, defending it, and then going on to UFC, that is exactly what you want to see, because it's like, okay, there's a progression there, and you're like, okay, you can follow along, and you know what's at stake for this fight, you know what's potentially at stake for the next one, and then where that can bring you to after that. And Palahan and Combate are probably the bad example of the point I was trying to make, is where, especially there's a lot of European promotions at the moment where you can have fighters going and winning a title, and then it's a case of what's next, and I have no idea what the answer is. Yeah, that's my
all
ramblings.
those questions, I guess, will be answered pretty soon, which is great for us. We don't have to make those decisions. We don't have to get in there and fight the fighters. We can just talk shit about it. yeah, which is good. But talking about someone who did get a title fight, I broke the news on SevereMMA that Franz Malambo is set to fight David Martinez for the bantamweight title, and you can't even label the two conversations, this one and Palahan's, because I mean, Franz has been there. Franz has the experience. Franz won the tournament. Franz certainly deserves this title shot, and it's great to see Franz getting in there. It's going to be a really, really good fight.
They must have resolved their differences over not shipping out Franz's trophy after the last one.
I don't know, maybe he's going to have to go over there and bring it back in pieces or something like that.
He's gone over to fight for it back.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. So I hope I might try and speak with him before the fight and see what the story is with that. But yeah, he's been definitely getting on to Campbell and Combate to get it sent over. Like, give the man his trophy, guys. Give him his fucking trophy. And now he's already won that trophy. He's going to try and take the bantamweight belt against David Martinez. That fight is on May 29th. No broadcast details for Paz or for Franz's fights have been announced as of yet. Hopefully, you know, they did a Facebook stream the last time for Paz fight, so hopefully they'll do that again this time, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Franz Malambos' fight on the next episode when it'll be a little bit closer to the time when he's fighting, which brings us on to the questions and answers section of the podcast. I like the questions and answers section. Appreciate everybody who sends in questions to us. Don't hesitate to send in questions. We put up the post on Thursdays and Fridays before we record. We record our podcasts on the Sunday, release them on the following Wednesday. So please don't hesitate to send us in questions. We love getting your questions in. The first one is for Carndog. Sarah Carney asks, what type of impact do you want the podcast to have on Irish MMA? It's a good question. I like that question. And I'll go to you first, Caoilte. I'll put you on the spot.
As soon as I leaned back, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get called here. I've been thinking, because when I saw the question, I was thinking, I don't really know. I was like, we started this more so out of like, saw the gap, thought, you know, impact, because impact's a bit of a, I don't know, it's a bit like, I don't know, Jesus Christ, I'm struggling here. Like what we want to do is just kind of highlight the sport, promote it in a positive light, but also give our opinions on things and be very straight up about stuff that we may not agree with either. Like, you know, we can't be fanboys all the same. So I guess that's the goal. The impact, I struggle with what the impact we kind of want is. I guess the impact would be to, the impact you want is for people to enjoy it and enjoy the podcast and support Irish MMA a little bit more. But besides that, I'm really caught with that question. It's a good one, as you were saying, but yes, maybe you guys will have more to say.
Maybe we want to have an overall positive impact. I mean, I think when we started this podcast, the interest and the motivation, I think for all of us, and I'll speak for the two of you as well, and you can disagree with me if you like, would be, you know,
I strongly disagree.
Would be that, you know, we had a love and a passion for Irish MMA. We had a love and a passion for MMA as a whole as well, but all of us being Irish and kind of following the scene. And, you know, for me, I'm just delighted with the opportunity to come on with Caoilte and to come on with Andy and get the chance to have conversations with the two guys who I know have a deep passion for Irish MMA along with myself. To shine a positive light on it, like Caoilte said, to express our opinions, whether some people might think they're right, some people may think they're wrong, but always my opinions will always come from a good place. And I feel that, you know, we can't buttercoat any topics or subjects. We have to express our true opinions, and you know, that's what it's about for me. Also given the spotlight and given the platform for Irish fighters to come on and speak with us every week is something that I greatly appreciate. And, you know, some of the times for me, it's not like what impact we want to have. It's a positive impact, and it's like being able to do this and being able to come on and talk about Irish MMA means a lot to me personally, to be honest. It's something, what I do here with this podcast and coming on with the lads is one of the highlights of me covering MMA as a whole. And, you know, I think the Irish scene is fucking great with a lot of great people in it as well. And the chance that for us to come on and talk about it and then to have a fighter on to tell their stories or to build an upcoming fight is something that I take great pride in myself. And this is only the start of it. Like, I mean, we're 8 episodes in and we're not going to be going anywhere. And I'm excited to see where the podcast goes. I mean, it might be a good question to ask us again in another year's time when we have a few more in the bag, because, you know, this is all new to us, and I'm just really excited. And every when we sit down to record this podcast every 2 weeks, it's one of the highlights of me covering the sport and something that I look forward to in general everyday life as well. I don't know if you have anything. I'm sure you have some things to add, Andy. I mean, we're all in it for the one reason, and that's for the growth and the love of Irish MMA.
Absolutely. What I want to achieve out of this podcast is legitimate sports coverage of MMA in Ireland. Ireland, or MMA, is still not recognised as an official sport in this country, and I think if we could even play the tiniest role in helping to legitimize it as a sport, like you look at, say, football, hurling, soccer, rugby, basketball, anything, there's so many. They're so widely accepted in Ireland. They're just normal. Boxing, even another combat sport. MMA is just not like that, and like, well, we have nothing to do. Like, it's the guys in IMMA are kind of working in the background, with Sport Ireland and with the Irish Martial Arts Council to achieve recognition for the sport in the country. The role that I think that we can play a part in is covering it the right way, in the sense of, look, fighters and promoters and gyms in Ireland, there's a lot of them out there who just want coverage the positive way. They just want cheerleaders essentially to say, look, isn't this great what they're doing? And while I like doing that on occasion, it's not legitimate sports coverage. Like, if you look at, say, an Off the Ball or anyone in Ireland, if you look at like Gavin Casey in boxing, if you look within MMA, because it's not just us, you look at P.T. Carroll writing for RTE, or Sean and Graham on this main podcast for SevereMMA, it's legitimate sports coverage. Like, we're not going to just say all the positive things. There are going to be times where there's fighters angry at us. There's going to be times where promoters are angry at us. There's going to be times where coaches are angry at us, and that shows that we're doing it the right way. Like, that's almost a necessary component of this. So I want to be, as you guys have already said, provide a platform, whatever platform we can provide, because I'm not saying we have a huge platform or anything like that, but provide a platform for fighters to come on, to learn, to tell their stories, for guys like Caoilte Loughran to be able to come on here and to talk about how he's moved from Ireland over to Liverpool to, you know, to chase a dream, for people like Chris Fields to come on, an OG of Irish MMA, and give his opinion that differs from the norm, where, you know, most in Ireland would be following the IMMA route and are very pro that route. He's against it, and I want to hear from different voices in the sport, because the three of us come from different backgrounds. I don't come from a martial arts background whatsoever. I just became a fan of the sport in maybe 8 years ago, maybe. It was around the McGregor rise, and when I started following MMA, immediately I was like, all right, well, I want to hear people talking about this. I want to, like, where is the sports show? And I found SevereMMA. I found Andrew McGahan and Sean and Niall and Petey, and this is where I started following. And then I got more and more invested, and more invested in Irish MMA, to the point where I'm like, well, I want to do this. I want to, like, why aren't we hearing from this fighter or that fighter, or what's going on at a more regional level? So that's kind of what I want to achieve out of this podcast. I want to give fair coverage to the fighters, but honest at the same time.
You lads had way more to say than me. Fair play to Sarah Kearney for the question.
I just go off on fucking long monologues.
Do you know? No, I like that question. Fair play for asking. And like, I'm pretty sure she's going to be announced for the Cage Legacy card as well. So that's always must watch action. She's the one girl that can cause cuts on your face and then fix them again afterwards. So can't wait to see her back in there.
It's a great question. I saw it, but I was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to shoot from the hip here. But like, I mean, Andy covered it quite well. It's like we have a job to do in covering it in the what we like to call the right way. And sometimes that's good. People are going to agree with that and agree with opinions, and sometimes they're not. But that's the way it is. But yeah, I'm very excited for this podcast. I'm excited, people are having an interest in it and asking us questions, and it's great to see, and long may it last, as they say. But thanks very much to Sarah for listening and for asking questions, and don't hesitate to ask more down the line as well. Declan Kenna asks, what fights are we most looking forward to on Cage Legacy 16, and who do we have in the main event? We kind of covered that a little bit at the start of the podcast. I mean, the couple of fights that we did mention, obviously Sean O'Bannon's fight, Nadine Abbott-Bissett's fight, Jamie Abbott-Bissett, Gary Rooney, 3 great fights.
It's got to be Sean in the main event, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think Sean is going to blow her out of the water, to be honest. I think it's a good...
Oh, sorry, he's asking. Sorry, I got that wrong. I thought he was asking who should they have as main event.
No. Yeah, Shauna has been announced as the main event.
But I agree with what you said, though.
Yeah. Shauna's for the main event, and I think she should pick up a win, and looking forward to seeing her perform again. Moving on to another one, Sean Shamrock asks, who is the greatest Irish American supporter, and why is it me? Credit to you, Sean Shamrock, pound for pound #1 on the Irish Americans.
He's a fantastic ambassador for all the Irish fighters.
Unreal. Great fella, and thanks for listening, and we appreciate the support. Ross Queerney asks, not a question, but we need MMA to be recognised as a sport in Ireland. It's a joke that it has not been already. Would you ever try to reach out to a political party for a statement or an interview on the matter? I mean, it's an option for sure, but I'm not too sure we'd hear anything different than what we've already been hearing. And not to speak too much on the subject, I think, we've been talking. It's a subject that, it keeps popping up and popping up. We're going to get somebody on the podcast to talk that in more detail about it for sure. Maybe the next episode we'll have a chat about it, but we're definitely going to have a talk about it to see where we're at, what progression has been made. I know there's lots of people working hard behind the scenes to make that happen, and I agree with Ross. It's a shame that it hasn't been recognised yet. They've have to jump through a lot of hoops, and I
don't know if it's as much like politicians that would need to be involved. Like I know, like Sinn Féin ministers brought it up in the Dáil last year. I think it was Chris Andrews. I don't remember the other guy. My understanding was that at least previously it was the Irish Martial Arts Council were very against having MMA. Like they were just against MMA, and the path to recognition through Sport Ireland was through the Irish Martial Arts Council. So I believe at some point last year their constitution needed to be changed or something like this to be able to allow our MMA to be involved. Now we haven't received many updates in the last kind of 6 months to 9 months. I don't know if Caoilte knows any more on that, but
no, the last update I had was because I remember speaking with the IMMA chairman Tim Murphy about it, and it was the only update back then was what you just said, Andy, and the only reason that it was brought up in the Dáil was because of the obstructions that they were facing, and Sinn Féin ministers brought it up there. Since then, we've not really heard much. I think we had it, maybe there was progress teased, or just that could have been also a throwaway comment in the past said to us, but no major updates since then really, and definitely something that we will look at soon enough, I guess.
Indeed, yeah. And like I said, we're going to have somebody on in an upcoming podcast to talk about a little bit deeper, and we'll ask questions and we'll see what progression is being made along those lines. And look, I think we're all singing off the same hymn sheet here. We all want Irish MMA to be recognised as a sport, and hopefully it happens sooner rather than later. Paul Brown asked, what's our preview for Jamie Abbott Bissett and Gary Rooney? We kind of gave a little bit of inkling into that towards at the start of the podcast. And we'll talk about that fight a little bit more in depth closer to the event as well. On Twitter, No Kick Just Nothing asks, do you think the current crop of amateur fighters has been stunted by the state of domestic MMA? I think it's quite the opposite right now. If I have to say, I think that amateur MMA is thriving in Ireland right now, whether it be through IMMAFs, whether it be through all the shows that are happening, like Cage Legacy, IUR, Premier FC, Cage Conflict, Clan Wars. All of these promotions are, and I probably missed a few as well. They're all putting on great amateur fights, and I think the amateur scene is absolutely thriving in Ireland, and it's great to see right now. If anything is being stunted, it's the professional ranks. We're seeing very little professional fights in Ireland right now. That kind of since 2016, for obvious reasons, after Carvalho's unfortunate death, that's kind of stunted, and the only professional fights we've seen are the likes of when Bellator comes in, or Cage Warriors put on a show, or Cage Conflict have been doing some great things, putting on some professional fights up there as well, which is great to see. I'd love to see more professional fights going down in Ireland, but I'd have to respectfully disagree with that. The amateur fighters have been stunted. I think that the amateur fighters are absolutely thriving in the environment in that, like, these shows have created and the IMMAFs have created in Ireland right now. I just want to get your thoughts on that, Andy.
I agree. I think that it's, if anything, it's the pros, and even with that, I do think we're starting to see a change. I think we're seeing a few more pro fights taking place here and there, but not enough. And I think there's so many. There's a lot of shows up north as well. So while there are very few in the Republic of Ireland, there's a lot of Northern Ireland. So we're a small country. While it is a bit of a pain in the arse, you can't get in the car, drive 3 hours, 2-3 hours, and you can find a show. But no, I'm quite happy with the state of amateur MMA at the moment. I think, and especially, you've kind of covered it perfectly there. You know, I agree with what you said essentially.
Perfect. Caoilte, and yourself, I mean, there's no better man to talk about amateur MMA on yourself. How do you feel about the current state of amateur MMA in Ireland right now?
Yeah, it's mad. It's stunted by the state of domestic MMA. I don't understand how Irish MMA at the amateur level would be stunted. The Ireland setup is one of the best around at the moment, I would argue. If you look at how active the amateur fighters are, how many shows are going on, like, as I said with Jamie Albissa and Gary Rooney earlier, they have fought so much this year. It's ridiculous. How is that going to stunt them? So there's looking at that. There's activity levels. But I think another way of looking at it is everything. It's competitive. You're not... So the amateur scene in Ireland is the best are fighting the best quite often. Not always, but quite often. Look at Troy Gibson, Jordan O'Neill. Then now we have Gary and Jamie is another example, and there's plenty of examples. I could go on. Compare that to the state of some other countries. It's crazy. Look at the UK. You don't in the UK scene. It's very, very common that you see amateurs fighting journeymen, cans. Sorry, I wouldn't even say journeymen, cans. Guys who are coming in there to lose as a confidence boost for their first fight. I've seen it so many times. So when you see that, there's a few other countries that happens in too. There's one in South America that have a massive issue with stuff like that. But when you compare that to the state of Ireland, Ireland is absolutely thriving. And long may it continue, because I do not want to see them go down the route of what I've seen in the UK, especially over the last 2 years.
Perfect. Well said. And that rounds us up for another episode of the Auld Triangle. We did it again, guys. We did it again. Another one in the books. Thank you very much for everybody for listening along, for asking questions. Hit the subscribe button if you're listening to this on Spotify, on SoundCloud, or iTunes, wherever you listen to it. Hit the subscribe button. Help us out. Hit the rate button.
Give it a
share.
share.
The podcast
Give it a share with your
friends.
mates.
Yeah, just tell us one person about this podcast. Help us grow. And and
that kind of speaks to what we're saying. You know, well, the more we grow, the more eyes we can put on. You know, play our small part in putting more eyes on Irish MMA and talking about Irish MMA. So help us help you.
Exactly. We're only at baby status right now, but we're looking to grow into something. We don't know what we're looking to grow into. We just want to fucking come on here, talk about Irish MMA, have a good time doing it, and talk to fighters and share our interest with everybody. And that's what we're going to continue to do. Like I said, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and tune into each and every episode. Every 2 weeks, we'll be back again with episode 9. Thank you to Andy for joining me today. Thank you to Caoilte. Go and follow the lads on Twitter and on Instagram at AndySteve123, at Caoilte the Barra, and myself at IO'NeillMMA. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks' time for another episode of the Auld Triangle. Goodbye.
Yep.
And good luck.
Slán go fóill.